Hey, everybody, this is your host, Joe Dellera, and welcome to another episode of Cash That. We've got a very special Olympics episode for you today, and there's been so much Olympic coverage from me. You know, we've talked on buckets. I've been on Brian Fonseca's show. We've put out a lot of basketball content for you guys, and I'm not going to I don't want to make this like a regurgitating type of thing. I'll hit you with some of the best bets that we gave from some of those, but definitely check out how this is coming out on some of those other channels as well. As the bets come in, we're going to be staggering some shows, so you'll be able to get the most up to date and like fastest lines if you're keeping up with all these types of media, right? And the one thing that I did want to start off with is I was talking to producer Cory, and I was like, producer Cory, you're always good at these like random, like niche markets. Like, what do we like here? So producer Cory said he actually has two bets that he really likes for men's and women's street skateboarding. These lines are a little bit more difficult to find, but you got Chris Jocelyn for the men's at 44-1. He likes him to win that. And for the women's, he likes Raisa Leal to win at plus 350. He said that Jocelyn, a little bit of a sneak pick, but it's a tough group. And he's a really good skater, and he's got the juice, he says. And then for Leal, producer Cory was saying that she competed when she was like 13. In the last one, just crushed. So she's the second favorite. Jocelyn's obviously a little bit further of a favorite. He said that for the men's, he was saying everybody's going to pick Naja. I don't know how to say it. I'm not sure if I'm butchering the name, but he said he's getting a little old. Naja is the favorite, but still, at the same time, we're getting some juicy numbers from producer Cory here, plus 2,500, plus 350. He also said that with surfing can get a little bit crazy. Obviously, they're not surfing in France, and they're actually surfing in Tahiti. And Tahiti, he was like, the swells in that spot in Tahiti can get really crazy. I talked about that a little bit with Brian Fonseca, and Calvin Wetzel gave out some really good bets on the Action Network pod. So take a look, see what you can do over there. It's definitely a good market that you can probably try to get into a little bit, trying to find like a little bit of value, But just to outline what I'm going to do today, and I want to talk a little bit about the Olympic content in general, how it's going to be coming out. So every day, for the most part, for the men's basketball, I'm going to be doing like some YouTube shorts. So that's going to be coming out. So there's going to be like shorter videos. There should be written content from me through the Action Network as well. And obviously, I'll be putting out plays on X and, trying to get this information out to you as fast as possible. It's tough. These lines are a little bit softer, as you guys saw with like the Giannis and the Fournier lines. It was nuts. Brian and I were live on his show, and the Giannis line, I gave it out at 16.5, and it's currently sitting at 23.5. Like we got 25 plus. It's plus 660, and on like we watched for Fournier, it opened at 7.5. We hit that, and then we hit 15 plus at plus 760. And FanDuel locked the market. They pulled down all the props for that game, and then they reopened Fournier at 13 or 12.5, and I think he got bet up again to 13.5. So really, like, some of these lines are really tough. Like, I'm trying to give you as much like stuff as I can early, so that way you have some of the tools to be able to bet it yourselves. But like, these markets are really soft. They are very, very difficult for the books to like use their projection models for a variety of different reasons. Number one, games are shorter; they're 40 minutes. Number two, the rules are different. You only have 5 fouls. You can sort of goaltend. What I mean by that is, like, as soon as the ball hits the rim, you're allowed to smack it away. So that can kind of impact some of the offense, especially in like those games against France when you got like Wemby and Gobert. That's, I think, notable. There's also, you can stay like in the lane. Like there's no violations for standing in the paint as a defender. So that's really important as well. So there's a couple different like swings like that. And like, you're not getting as many ticky-tack fouls either. So I think like Embiid is somebody that might struggle a little bit in that regard. I think Shea, to a degree, could struggle as well. So there's a couple different things that are notable and they can really kind of impact the way these markets are. So we're going to do our best to give you a lot of good angles, a lot of good content. Right now, some of the bets that I'm looking at for some of the early games that we gave out already, and I'm just going to run through those right off the top. So that way, if you missed it, you can grab it. I liked France to medal at plus 175 at like at a minus number. I don't think I would bet it. I think that the number at plus 175 was just wrong based on what the market was. LeBron James team assist leader plus 450. We grabbed that at. That's down to like plus 160. So if you can get over like 2.5 to 1, great. So, like, I would take it. Otherwise, I might look at Drew Holiday. Drew Holiday, I think you can get around 5 to 1 or so. I think that's where I would go with it. We hit the Giannis props. We hit the Evan Fournier props. I'd logged in the Action Network app USA Women's 3x3 Olympic champs at plus 175. Grabbed a little bit of that. Australia to win the group plus 600 at BetMGM. We grabbed a little bit of a sprinkle on the continent winner being Europe. So that gets you 5 different teams. That's getting you France, Serbia, Greece, Germany, and Spain. So you're getting almost half the field at 5 to 1. You're basically, aside from the United States, obviously, you're really punting with like Canada and Australia. But I like Australia to win the group. But at the same time, it's entirely possible coming out of the group of death. That's the other thing. Canada, Australia are both in the group of death with Spain and Greece. Very tough group. It's entirely possible that like both of those teams don't even make it out of the group, or one of them doesn't make it out of the group. So I like Europe. It's spread out pretty much talent wise. I think that we're going to get a couple teams to get through. Steph Curry to lead Team USA in scoring. There's actually, I gave it out at plus 350. It's down to like plus 300, but ESPN actually has a boost right now for plus 400. I bet it personally like a month ago, but I wanted to see where it was going to open up at other places. It was 6 to 1 then. I wish I gave it out then, but sometimes that's just the nature of the game, right? I like Jock Landale to lead Australia in scoring at 7 to 1. Evan Fournier to lead France in scoring at 8 to 1. And for the women's, Asia Wilson to lead Team USA in scoring plus 275. So those are all the bets that we've already given out in one way, shape, or form somewhere else on like one of these avenues, one of these channels. I wanted to start off at the top with those. That way you guys could kind of get them, what have you. Now what I want to do is I'm going to talk player props. We don't have a ton for the opening games. FanDuel, like I said, FanDuel opened some stuff, so we're gonna kind of try to work with what we have there as best as we can, and just kind of see if there's anything that we can kind of sink our teeth into. But it's been a little bit difficult because even when FanDuel is like giving us some odds, they are giving us like a couple things that we can bet. They're really only giving us like the NBA players. We're not getting a ton of some of the international players, and some of those guys are some of the names that like I really wanted to focus on. I really wanted to kind of target, and without getting some of those lines, it's making it a little bit more difficult, right? But I want to start off with Team Canada, actually. And Andrew Nembhard just signed this big contract with the Indiana Pacers. I think it was a great signing for them as like an NBA aside, right? They're getting him and what I think is going to be like a below market deal as the media rights expand, as we get the new media deal, as all that money comes in. He was very effective without Tyrese Halliburton on the floor. And I think that he's able to run an offense, facilitate an offense. He obviously has some growing pains, but at the same time, we've seen him be able to play with some other like semi-ball dominant players. Halliburton obviously needs the ball in his hands. Pascal Siakam needs the ball in his hands. Benedict Mathurin needed the ball in his hands. So a lot of players that kind of needed the ball, and he was pretty effective. So I actually like him, I think, as a sprinkle, maybe like 0.1 or 0.15 unit type of play, at plus 1,400 to lead Team Canada in assists. When we look at Team Canada's roster, right, you don't really have like a ton of I don't feel like you have a ton of assist talent, if that makes sense. I think that we have a decent amount, right? But at the same time, when we look at who's really on the team, we're looking at a situation where you have a Shea Gilgeous-Alexander, you have a Jamal Murray, but you don't really know exactly how many minutes Murray's going to play. Shea always is like a little bit more of a score first type of guy, and I think that is important. And I think that Nembhard could kind of carve out a role there for himself as a facilitator. He played pretty well during the preliminary games, had a couple games where he was really racking up a couple assists. And I think that the important thing is that nobody on Team Canada really had those monster games. Another guy I was looking at was Kelly Olynyk. I think that Kelly Olynyk's going to wind up getting a lot of run. I think he's going to play a lot as one of the few like kind of centers on the team. But at the same time, I think that Nembhard should be able to run like a second unit, I think, for this team. And if he's able to get some of those minutes without Shea, maybe without Barrett, without like Dylan Brooks, I think that that's going to help his ceiling in terms of the assists. So at 14-1, I think it's worth a little bit of a play. Another angle that I like actually a lot more, even like in terms of what I would want to risk, is I like RJ Barrett to lead the team in rebounds at plus 500 at ESPN. He's averaged 5.3 rebounds per game for Team Canada during these preliminary like warm-up games. Like I mentioned just a minute ago, they don't have like a ton of depth at like the center position, and RJ, as like, you know, as a Knicks fan, we talked about him. Like he's got his issues, but at the same time, RJ can kind of play up a little bit. He's a bigger player. He's a stronger player too. Like when we look at who else Team Canada is really going to be playing with. So I think that this is a good opportunity for him, especially when we think about the fact that Olynyk and Powell both have Olynyk more so, but there's the ability to kind of stretch the floor, play a little bit outside, and that can kind of open up a couple more rebounds and rebounding opportunities for RJ Barrett. Those guys aren't necessarily like on offense, they don't necessarily have to play like directly under the basket, and even on defense, they're a little bit more like switchable, or so to speak. So I think that all of that kind of can play into this. And I think at plus 500, it's worth a stab. I'm seeing this as low as like plus 300. So definitely shop around for these. The lines are kind of all over the place. It's tough. Like, you know, I don't necessarily think I like it at like 2-1, 2.5-1, but at 5-1, I think that it's definitely worth a play. I want to turn. So that being said, in this first game that Canada is going to be playing against Greece, RJ Barrett's rebounding line is at over under 4.5. I would lean the over 4.5 in this game. I do think it's a tougher game given the fact that it's against Greece. But it's also a little bit interesting because Giannis hasn't been rebounding the ball that great. And maybe this is an opportunity to pick up, you know, like a little bit of a sneaky spot for RJ Barrett. So, like I said, 5.3 per game, lines at 4.5 at FanDuel at minus 104. I think that's something that we could get into a little bit in that game. I want to look at Team USA. It's one of the games that we have some props on Brian Fonseca's show. I had given out and mentioned a couple different things because it's USA versus Serbia for this game. And I had mentioned that I said, like on the show, I was like, I think I like Embiid under 8.5 rebounds. That was like minus 140 at the time. The line's fucking under 7.5 at plus 100 now. And the other play that I liked and I was looking at was LeBron over 5.5 assists. That's plus 130 now. I liked it at, I had mentioned it at, over under 4.5. So these lines are kind of like I said, they're really soft. Like we had a good amount of people in the live, but at the same time, it was getting, it's like we mentioned it and these lines were just moving. So it's really tough right now with only FanDuel having odds up. But these are just some of the things that I would look at because you just don't know like where the books are going to open at because, maybe they have like underneath, they have like a certain framework and they're like, this is what we're going to open it up with and not base it off of what any other books have done. So I liked LeBron to lead the team in assists. We grabbed that. That was like as high as plus 450, plus 400, whatever. We just crushed it. And like I mentioned earlier, I think Drew has a little bit of juice as well. He's the thing about Team USA, and I think that this is important in particular about like top scorer because we like Curry plus 400. The thing about Team USA is they have so many dudes and they just like don't have to play a lot. Like you can run like a real rotation. At the same time, when I was watching some of these games, I was like, man, like this feels like a lot of Anthony Edwards, and like not in a good way. I love Ant. I think his game is awesome, but at the same time, he still has some growing to do. Like it feels like those. It feels like honestly like that first Olympic team that LeBron was on, where you had a lot of guys that just like didn't that were really young. There wasn't a ton of veteran leadership, and you had players that were like used to having the ball in their hand, but they still weren't efficient enough yet to generate like strong, consistent offense against teams. And that's kind of what my concern is with like an Anthony Edwards or somebody like that. Like I think there's a little bit too much of that. So I'm wondering if, despite the fact that he did score a lot of points for Team USA in some of these preliminary games, I'm wondering like how sustainable that is. And I wonder if Kerr is going to actually like stick with those rotations, or if he's going to lean a little bit more on like his better players. I think early in the tournament, he might not have to do anything funky. He might be able to kind of lean on some of those rotations, because the first game against Serbia is the United States' toughest test in this group, and they're minus like 14 and a half point favorites. I think that line is crazy. I think that you should be betting on Serbia. I bet Serbia at like 15-1 to win the game, just on the money line on Bet365. You can still get that at like 1,000, like plus 1,000. You should absolutely be sprinkling that. It's basically a proxy for Serbia to win the group. South Sudan plays Puerto Rico in their first game. The line actually flipped. Sorry, we're kind of getting away from the props here for a second, but like that line actually flipped to Puerto Rico, from Puerto Rico minus 3.5 to South Sudan minus 1.5. I think that is a gross overreaction to South Sudan's play against the United States in that game. South Sudan had their chance. I think they played like the best game they possibly could have played. Puerto Rico is a great team. They shoot a lot of threes. Waters has been incredible as a scorer. He's a look to like maybe lead that team in scoring. I think it's between him and Alvarado, but like you may as well grab the guy at plus money, like plus 100. So I think that that's a two-man race. I don't mind that look. But I do think it's a little bit of an overreaction to South Sudan's play against the United States. So for me, I think that Team USA should roll through the group. Serbia is a tougher test, but the one concern that you have to have with this United States team is that they just don't shoot a lot of threes. When we really look at what Team USA has been doing, was like they it's a little bit, they just don't take a lot of threes, and it opens them up to variance in like the worst way possible, right? When we've talked about this, like I've talked about how with like the Celtics, for example, the Celtics took a lot of threes. So that actually did like the opposite thing. Like that actually kind of helped them a little bit, because they just weren't taking a lot of threes, right? Or they were taking so many threes, and it raised their ceiling like exponentially for every game, because they had upward mobility in terms of their scoring. This United States team, they don't shoot a lot of threes. Because they don't shoot a lot of threes, it's like your ceiling is capped in terms of what your offense is, just based on like a number of points that you could score in any given possession, right? When you do that, it makes your margin for error thinner, and it's kind of what happened to them in some of these games, where these teams like Germany, for example, Germany shot three times as many threes as the United States in that scrimmage game. The United States won, but Germany was in it the whole game. They kept it close. It was a tight game. Germany could have won, absolutely. And it's a concern when you start playing some of these better teams, like a Serbia, like a Germany, like a France, like I don't know, like an Australia, like a Canada, right? Any of those teams that can maybe get up a ton of threes, you start getting into like a danger zone of like, oh, like we could just lose this game because we like were cold and they just shot the lights out from 3-point range. So it's something to keep an eye out for. And it's a reason that you should probably be looking to bet a lot of underdogs, honestly, against the United States, whether it's against the spread or on the money line, just because that opens them up to a level of variance. It opens them up to vulnerability. And I think that that's something that I'm wondering if that's going to change at all during the tournament. But it's definitely a little bit of a concerning thing. And it's odd when you think about the fact that it's a Steve Kerr coach team. Spo is one of the assistant coaches. Tyronn Lue is one of the coaches as well. And like Spo's a guy that's like loves to jack up the van. I think that this fucking ads. I think that this is a vulnerability of this United States team. And I'd be looking to take 3-point props on like for the opponents against the United States, because I think that that's going to be like a conscious coaching decision to try to jack up the variance and win these games. Because like at the end of the day, it's a zero-sum game. Like it doesn't matter if you're close with the United States. That's not what your goal is. Your goal is to win these games. So like teams are going to be looking to try to shoot a lot of threes, try to like keep these games close, like or like to be in a position that they can win. And it's going to lead to some, I think, like a really wide range of outcomes, because the United States floor, I think, is really high based on like the personnel, the guys that they have on the team. But if teams run cold from three, the United States are probably going to blow their doors off. If other teams shoot really well from three, then that's an opportunity for like a pretty big, pretty significant, pretty like historic upset, or so to speak. I wanted to talk about Joel Embiid a little bit. There's been a lot of conversation about like, oh, like Embiid shouldn't start. We have the Bam and AD combo has been awesome. I feel like the Bam, like, I agree. I think that maybe Embiid doesn't need to start. At the same time, though, I do think that the roster, like, it seems to be okay. Like, they're starting Embiid, you're running him with LeBron and Curry, and at the end of the day, even if you're able to close with AD and Bam, then like that's great. And those AD Bam lineups are just going to wreck second units. Nobody's going to be prepared for that level of like athleticism, whatever. On the flip side, I'm kind of like, well, Embiid crushes bad players. And it just seems like it would be a great opportunity to have Embiid just feast on like bench units in the Olympics if he came off the bench. So interesting scenario. We'll see how that plays out. We'll see if they make any switches as the tournament goes on. Let's turn to France, the host nation. I like Fournier as the scoring leader. He has not played great so far during some of these preliminary games. France hasn't played great during some of these preliminary games either. And, obviously, like it's a little bit, I would say it's a little bit of a concern for France and some of my to medal bets. It's definitely a little bit concerning, right? But at the same time, I think that this French team has a lot of talent. I like what they have in terms of being the host nation. I like that they have Victor Wembanyama. I like that they have Rudy Gobert. You have the top two players in Defensive Player of the Year voting. With Fournier, he only played like 18 minutes a game in some of those preliminary games. I wouldn't like totally trust that as being like, oh, like this is what he's going to play, right? And the reason I say that is in almost every other international competition over the last like number of years, right? Fournier has led the French team in scoring in like their last 5 international competitions. So it's definitely something that I'm looking at and I'm saying like, yeah, well, I think that Wemby obviously has the ceiling, but I don't think that Wemby should be I don't think that he should be like a prohibitive favorite here. I think that they've been fine. Like with Wemby kind of taking on that role. But at the same time, I think that when we get into some of these playing games, I think they were trying to get Wemby some reps. I think they're trying to see how he fits in with the team. He should lead the team in scoring. But at 8-1, I think Fournier is a little bit mispriced here, just given the fact that they don't have great guard play, and he should be able to really kind of get the ball. He can stretch the floor. He can take a lot of threes, and Fournier is not a good defensive player. We know that. But when you have guys like Victor and Rudy, you can kind of compensate for the defensive deficiencies of a guy like Fournier. So I think he's going to see plenty of minutes. They obviously have Bilal Koulibaly now too. So I do think this is going to be a good French team. And I like what their upside is here. They did struggle out the stretch in some of these games. They won. So it's interesting. So they played 5 prep games. They won the first 2. They crushed Turkey, as they should. They beat Germany 90-66. But then they lost 4 games in a row. They lost to Germany 70-65. They lost to Serbia 79-67. They lost to Canada 85-73, and then they lost to Australia 83-82. All those teams are really good. I think that they were some of the bigger tests for this French team. They played them close. I think that the minutes are going to, like, I think that some of the rotations are going to change here. I think that we're going to see a swing in, what the minutes are that these guys are playing. Like when one of these losses to Germany, the 70-65 game, Victor didn't play. And when we look at the way the rotation was, Gobert played 21 minutes. Fournier played 24. He scored 10 points. So that was fine. But like the leader in terms of in terms of minutes, it was spread out like really, really evenly. When we look at the game that they lost to Australia, 83-82, Victor played 26 minutes, Gobert played 21. But at the same time, like you saw Fournier only play 18. Nando De Colo only played 18. Koulibaly only played 9. So I don't know how much I trust some of these rotations here. In the game against Canada, Gobert played 24 minutes, Victor played 25 minutes, Koulibaly played 21, Fournier 24. That's probably one of the games where you look at it and you're like, all right, Canada kind of whipped them pretty good. But at the same time, they only shot 8 for 25 from 3. Canada shot 9 for 26 from 3. It was one of those games where it was close, and I think that it's okay that they lost that game. Canada's a good team. I don't read too much into the fact that they lost 85-73. In the game against Serbia is a tough game for them in particular because Jokic is a guy that can just bully the crap out of Wemby and Gobert. We've seen that. The other thing is, though, Gobert only played 12 minutes in that game. We're not going to see him only play 12 minutes in like pretty much any game. So I think that the combination of having Victor and Gobert, if we see that matchup, is going to be tough for them. We're going to see France play Germany, and we'll talk about Germany in a minute, but Germany does not have a ton of size. They have Daniel Tice, they have Mo Wagner, Franz Wagner, Franz Wagner as well, and they have Dennis Schroeder as their point guard. They don't have a ton of size, so I think that that's something that France is going to really be able to take advantage of. So I think I'm not reading too much into the fact that they lost some of these preliminary games. And I think that while we can read into the preliminary games a little bit, it depends on how these teams are taking them, how they're coming out and playing them. So for me, I'm not super concerned about France dropping like 4 straight games in those preliminary markets. I still think they're one of the better teams in this tournament. So I'm going to leave it at that. The other bet that I like is Victor Wembanyama's assists for the first game. His assist line is set. It was at 3.5. Did it move? It moved to 4.5 at plus money. It's just inevitable, right? I think that you should be betting Victor's assists lines, especially against Brazil. Like, part of why I like this is Brazil plays fast, so you're going to get some opportunities for that. I also mentioned how France doesn't have like a true primary facilitator. Victor's been awesome in these. I'm saying awesome kind of loosely in terms of the facilitating, but he's averaging 4.4 assists per game during these preliminary games. They don't have like a top tier assist guard. You can get him to lead the team in assists at plus 200. I think that If you can get turnover props, I'd love some turnover props, but I think that over 4.5 assists is a good play. 6+ is plus 245. I think those are some good angles in this first game in game one, against Brazil. For Australia, I mentioned Jock Landale for scoring leader. They don't have Giddy's not like a score first guy. Landale's going to get plenty of minutes at the center position. Patty Mills has been historically their number one scorer, but he's getting a little older. So I like Landale at 7-1. And Giddy, top total assists in the Olympics, I think is worth a stab at plus 1,200. I think they're going to be able to get out of their group. If they win one game and they get into the semifinals, then they're playing an extra game. So that's the other thing. When you're betting top overall, the top overall for the whole tournament, those markets, you want teams that you think are going to be competing for a medal because you're going to get an extra game. Even if you lose in the semifinals and you don't make it to the gold medal game, you obviously still get to compete against the other loser in the bronze medal game. That extra game can be the whole difference in these markets. So when I'm looking at some of these spots and you'll see, I think for top total steals, for example, Thomas Walkup is number 2 in that category. He's from Greece. We'll get to that in 2 seconds, actually. For overall, the Olympics, for top total steals, he is 3rd. He's plus 1,100. It's Shea, Dyson Daniels, Thomas Walkup at 11-1. Shea makes some sense because he's on Team Canada, a team that is second favorite to win the gold. Dyson Daniels is on Australia, another team that's a relatively strong candidate, right? Walkup is 11-1 on Greece. Greece is I think a clear 3rd in the group of death with Canada, Australia, Spain, and Greece. Even if they get out of there, which I think they will, I think they will. I think Spain's going to be the odd man out. It's going to be tough because they're probably going to have to play a team like the United States or France or Germany in that first game. And that's going to be tough, in the quarterfinals. So that's a game they're probably going to lose. I'm not super interested in Walkup to lead in steals at 11-1. The other thing is, guys in the United States generally aren't going to lead in any of these categories because they can spread the roster out so much. You don't have guys playing 35 minutes a game. It just doesn't really happen, especially for the whole tournament. Whereas you'll see other teams play we'll see how many minutes Wemby plays. We'll see how many minutes a Franz Wagner or Dennis Schroeder plays, or even a Shea. But you need the right combination of guys that are going to play a lot of minutes, but then also the team is thin enough that they're going to play a ton of they're going to get an extra game, and they're going to play a ton of minutes on a day-to-day basis. So I do like Thomas Walkup to be the team steals leader for Greece at minus 134 at Bet365, but I wouldn't consider him for top total steals in the entire tournament. And that's part of why I like Giddy, like I said, top total assists. I think they have a little bit of juice in terms of being able to maybe win a medal, or at least being able to get into a medal game. And that's kind of what this is a bet on. For Serbia, Bogdan Bogdanovic should probably lead the team in scoring. I don't love the price. It's plus 125, plus 130. I think that's a fair bet. I think you certainly have to be concerned about Jokic. I do think that he's a good bet for total points leader at 20-1 at ESPN. He's one of the better guards that they have. He's obviously a 3-point shooter. It's a shorter 3-point line. I think this is a good opportunity for him on a Serbian team that is not only really good, but I think could go kind of far in the tournament. They have a ton of upside. It's odd, but I kind of like the fact that they're in the group with the United States early, because it makes it less likely that they're going to play the United States until a little bit later in the knockout round. I don't think they're going to have a ton of difficulty against Puerto Rico or South Sudan for similar reasons that I mentioned before in regards to the United States. And I think that this is just a good bet to kind of back Bogdanovic. Looking at Germany, I like as well. I think you can bet Franz Wagner overall scoring leader 20-1 at ESPN. He's averaging 19.3 points per game for the Germans during these warm-up games. He's a player that they need on the floor. He can score kind of every level. He's a guy that really benefits actually from the 3-point line being a little bit closer. He's not a great 3-point shooter. So having this line be a little bit closer, it helps him. He's able to get up some of those shots. And I think that Germany is like a sneaky team. Like they should certainly get through along with France out of their group. And because the rest of the group is Brazil and Japan. Like we should have no issues with this. Germany, we also saw they just won the World Cup last year. They're a team that's very good. I think that they're going to be in this tournament a long time. So getting them at 20-1. Remember, like when we're betting these like super long shots, kind of, I like throwing like a 0.1 or a 0.15 of a unit on them. You can bet a couple of them. Basically, allocate one unit to this and maybe like spread it around with like 3 or 4 guys. And you're going to be able to, even if any of them cash, you're going to be in a decent scenario where you're maybe returning like a 5 or a 6-1, right? In that same boat, I don't mind Dennis Schroeder overall assist leader at 5-1 on DraftKings. He is the clear number one facilitator on that team. It's really not like even a question. We know it's Dennis Schroeder. As much as Franz Wagner can kind of dish when he can, that is not something that is his like primary skill. Dennis Schroeder has the ball in his hands a lot. He just won the World Cup MVP. I think that 5-1, it's a little bit long. You can get this depends on the book. Again, DraftKings has it 5-1. I've seen 2-1 or 2.5-1, 3-1 as well. So like those lines are kind of crazy for an overall assist leader when you just don't know how far they're going to go though. The final prop note that I have for Team Germany is Andreas Obst is a threes king. He basically only shoots from 3. If that market arises, BetMGM has top team threes. He's minus 200 at MGM. I think it's a bet. If you want to lay that kind of juice, you could maybe use it as a parlay piece. Pretty much all of his shots are threes. If I can bet him to be like the overall tournament threes leader, I would bet that. I don't know if I'm going to see it. I think we would get an awesome number because of Curry. I would bet that. I think alternatively, we haven't gotten a lineup yet. I'm curious to see where we get his threes line for the first game against who do they play first? Germany plays Japan. Right now, they only have a couple props up. They have Dennis Schroeder's lineup. They have Rui Hachimura, and they have Franz Wagner. That's it. That's really all we're getting right now. That's all we're getting for this game right now on FanDuel. I think that none of those lines that they currently have up are playable, but I'd be waiting for an Obst threes line. That's something that I would be looking for, and it's something that you should be looking out for as well. So those are my main thoughts right now for some of the series leaders, some of the team leaders, like what those prop markets are. I think that they're really fun. I think they're a little soft. I think it's a good opportunity to kind of like, and you can kind of shape what I've given you here for applying to your like player prop bets as well. So you can see like what I'm liking and then probably find some of the value on an individual game basis. So keep your eyes peeled. I think these lines are going to come out over the next day or so. These games are like early on Saturday for the most part. So I would imagine lines like kind of have to come out by like hopefully Thursday. Definitely, I would imagine Friday. I also just don't know what kind of like liquidity or what kind of action they really want on this. So definitely curious to see. And we'll just kind of have to keep an eye on it. As for pods and recs, though, I am going to recommend. Well, I just got a dehumidifier, so that was kind of a big deal. Needed that in the basement. We were having some issues in like the finished basement so dehumidifier definitely helped. Highly recommend. I would also recommend getting the ones that like can drain directly into your sump pump. Kind of a nice thing there. That's not really relevant to so many people. So I'm gonna have to give another recommendation. For my next recommendation, I am going to recommend. I got frozen chicken sausage, like breakfast chicken sausage. It's the best. It's great. Like you can get like these little links, and they're only like 25 calories per link. It's nice because like You could throw it I like to throw it in the microwave a little bit, thaw it out first, and then I like to throw it in the pan to like brown it, give it that little bit of flavor crust. Maybe then at that point chop it up, uh, put it in an omelet, put it on a sandwich, whatever. You get the links. They got the patties as well. They're only like 70 calories then, but you only need then like one patty if you're putting it on a sandwich. So it kind of depends on what you're like. Let me know if you're like a links guy, if you're a patty guy, like whatever. I think it's definitely like a really fun way to kind of spice up your breakfast options a little bit. And it's easy, and they're chicken sausage, so it's not really that unhealthy. It's not the healthiest, but like, look, it is what it is. Listen, guys, I forget to ask this, but like, if you're listening to the podcast on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, watching then I guess as well, just like, subscribe, leave some comments. It really helps me out. And, if you haven't reviewed the podcast, definitely do so. It would be super helpful for me and would definitely really appreciate it. So, look, let's try to, do our best with these Olympic bets. We have a ton of things that we're waiting for, and we'll just kind of have to see how the lines come out, and, we'll just have to do our best here. But I'm trying to give you guys the tools that you need in order to be profitable during the Summer Olympics, and it's going to be an absolute blast. So get those breakfasts ready. These games, some of them are early. Fire up that chicken sausage in the pan, maybe with some egg whites if you're trying to make it a little bit healthier, and let's continue to cash that.